So let's get into a little bit about what you do in your business.
Yeah, so what I was saying is this has been a constant thing. I used to work in marketing for a really long time, and what's funny is that using that principle that I would use for other small businesses on like how to define your UVP and how to
UVP?
your unique value proposition, like the
nice.
thing that you do better than 95% of the other groups, because you don't just want to be a plumber. You want to be a plumber who's like on time. You don't just want to be like an attorney. So instead of getting confused with being a videographer, I was trying to clarify like how we're really different. We're like learning design experts matched with cognitive scientists matched with filmmakers. So that if you look at it like on a Venn diagram, we're in the center of that.
Nice.
So different companies will hire us for complex soft skills. So soft skill is anything that's like, hard skill, something that's like, fixing a car, installing a brake pad, something that's almost instructional and you can do it linearly. Soft skill is more complicated, integrated. When you think about sales training, it's not just sell better. You have elements of negotiation. You have elements of etiquette, ethics, project management, communication, a lot of different skills you have to synthesize into one cohesive strategy. So we create content that's like an Aesop fable or that's analogous to the learning points that you want to translate. Some things are very hard for people to understand, or they may understand them at a cognitive level, but not an emotional level. So therefore you lose them in getting motivated to actually take action. So we create like, they're indistinguishable from what you see on TV.
So do you take kind of like the hero's journey?
So
do you utilize that?
Yeah, I mean, monomyth is like a feature for certain kinds of brands, but we're not tied to any kind of structure. I mean, I'm very big into storytelling design. The idea that there's one mythic structure that follows everything it's kind of bollocks, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I love Joseph Campbell. He's
I was
awesome.
about to say.
But neuroscience like immediately disproves it. If you read like, African stories or, Mexican folktale, it's radically different. It immediately disproves it.
What's some of the differences?
Well, just in terms of like the idea that you have, right? Like, so in the hero's journey, there are very specific compartments that each category falls into. Really what he was doing was not to say this is the one, size fits all, but to say that there are commonalities among culture. But they're just different. Like you have different importances. Like watch Japanese cinema and compare it to American films, radically different themes. You have power themes in America that are more about strategy in Japanese anime or Japanese cinema. They have like overlap. Or you watch films from the Czech Republic in the 1970s, and it's very, very different kind of themes and references and meaning. You wouldn't expect it to see, or it'd seem unfamiliar otherwise.
So you create these badass videos for people, essentially.
Yeah, and I think the idea is a lot of the companies are global. So they have like multiple different kinds of cultural influence. So, some of our clients have branches in Hyderabad, India. And it's like, so how do you make a training film in the US that caters to both the North American branch and the Asian branch and the Indian branch? Like how, you have to reconcile those things. So we think about universal themes. So an example of something that would be universally respected and appreciated or leveraged is politeness. Politeness is universal irrespective of the culture that you're from. And the funny thing is that we actually treat devices with politeness, like computers and iPads and iPods and stuff. We don't think we do, but there's actually like a significant evidence about
anger.
Yeah,
like people cuss at their phones, like it's doing, like it knows what it's doing.
Yeah, because you treat it like it's a real person. And so we're tapping into a lot of that and saying, well, how does that interface with a story? How does that interface with a training or with UX UI? If you're looking at it from a design perspective, this is a learning experience. So it's not just in isolation of watch a movie and then boom, you have the knowledge. It's integrating different aspects of education to say, well, there's no such thing as a learning style. There are learning preferences, and I'm happy to just explain the difference because I know some people are like, what? There are learning styles, but there aren't. Meaning like, there's nothing inherent about reading that makes it easier for you to imbibe an understanding of information than say like listening to an audiobook of it. You may just be bad at reading if that's the case. And scientists have not been able to distinguish that. So early when learning styles came out, they found that people just had inadequacies. But they attributed that to, that's actually what they prefer, how their brain's wired. But you don't remember more like objectively from an audio presentation or a video presentation than you do, say, like,
Is it about equal?
So it's actually far more complex than that, and that it's a integration of multiple kinds of learning exposure. So you don't just want to limit like PowerPoint and just say that's the only way you do things.
It's kind of saying you're like leaving like things on the table by dismissing this, like, oh, I am not a reader by nature, so I can't do it.
Right,
Yeah.
and so I remember going to this this vocational school for television, and they were like, "Yeah, I don't read very well, so what do I do?" And it was like, "You learn to read."
Yeah.
I mean, because unfortunately, you got a manual, and you have to do like a quick, Control F to find something in a PDF online. You're not going through your lynda.com course being like, what was the function and how do I turn it on this camera? You have to find it quickly. So you have to be able to read as a reference. Otherwise, you're screwed.
There's just inadequacies that you haven't learned yet or spent the time into,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah. And everything is like, the beauty of this is like intelligence is a flexible protein.
It's very
thing.
plastic.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of people think that, IQ is this like, that's it, that's determined, you're done. But no, you have a lot of room for development. And so part of the encouragement is to say, don't get fixated on that, actually focus on.
What about genetics? Don't you think people have different limits?
Yeah. I mean, genetics, is the way I've heard it put that I like is it's like your starting point on the race, but like there's a lot more you can do.
Yeah.
And then assuming that you don't have some, really grievous disadvantage or disease or genetic, the genetic mutation that puts you at a disadvantage, for all intents and purposes, there really isn't that much of a limit.
I feel it. Yeah. I think I get that. Yeah.
Well, because I think it was Jeff Colvin's book, Talent is Overrated, that really ruined my life. I was like 9:00 at night. I'm like, I'll just read a chapter. 4:00 in the morning, I'm still reading this fucking book. I'm like, oh my God, it ruined my life. Well, because it was so much about this is it. Like you can really work as hard as you want. Now I see talent shows where people are juggling Rubik's cubes and then they become fully formed, and you're like, I used to think that's amazing, and now in my brain I'm like, oh, that guy just spent way too much time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, for sure.
It's not a bad thing, but it's just you really you could apply yourself in any respect, which I think is really powerful.
And especially if you narrow it down, like some crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that's been the biggest challenge when you talk about entrepreneurship or storytelling specifically, because it's been hard to find a mentor. And you can read a lot of interesting books on business development. I remember reading a bunch of sales books, and now I'm into high market sales, and all of the stuff I learned was for like low dollar amounts, like selling Cutco. Like I sold Cutco knives when I was in college, and it was great, and I learned a lot. And then all the books about that were very much like retail store environment. How do you get a quick sale? How do you get people? You close the sale means you get the purchase. But when you're dealing with high contracts, you're selling over $15,000 services. That's your cheapest item. Now you're getting into like, that doesn't work. Closing actually leads to fewer sales. Yeah.
What do you mean?
So we are having an exchange, and I say, yeah, where can I send this? And I get your address, and I start filling it out in the order form. That works if I'm selling you a widget. That's $15. It's like you're already kind of in it.
There's no order form for bigger things.
Not in the same way. You have stakeholders, you have committees, you have people that are buying. They're like, well, I can't actually sign on that line. I physically don't have the power. Like, you can use my signature. It's not going to go anywhere. So I need to bring it to my boss, and the boss is going to review it and in 5 minutes go, yep, no, thanks. We're good, because the value prop is not what I want. So now we have to completely pitch differently, and you have to build relationships, which takes more time, which puts your sales velocity, the lead to close ratio, at a much like longer stint. So it's just a new way of looking at stuff. So that's kind of like my journey and my excitement is figuring out more about like how to systematize that. But
how have you gone about learning that?
So the mind-blowing thing for me was marketing automation.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if I could, for people that are in my position that are selling high-end services or that require a long nurture time, marketing automation's it. It saved me like 15 hours a week.
And marketing automation and automation in general has been a theme with a lot of these episodes over the last week and a half.
I mean, I'm seeing it more. And there's an intelligent way to do it. It's not new. I mean, this comes back from like direct response marketing. I mean, even back in the 80s, they had some kind of iterations of it. It's customer journey applied, in some kind of systematic way.
This is a show where we have real conversations with the business owners and entrepreneurs here in Colorado Springs, doing things in the community of Colorado Springs.